Hi y'all, it is day 9 of reading CPS Fail Stories that you have shared with me until they decide to do something. Let's jump right into it.
CPS has been involved in my life for as long as I can remember. I felt like we couldn't go more than a year without a social worker or two coming to the house. At first, when I was young, I didn't really know what or who they were. I just assumed that this was a normal thing, or maybe involved with adult business that my dumb child brain just didn't get, and low-key saw them coming as non-eventful.
This is not normal.
But as I grew up and came out of the fog, I started to understand what was going on and how effed up my life was. For context, my mom was and is extremely emotionally and verbally abusive. However, she is not stupid. She would go just short of the line of illegal. She wouldn't really punch me or anything hard enough to leave a bruise because she knew that she would get in trouble, especially in the later years when I made it clear that I wasn't going to just sit there and take it. The worst she would do physically was dig her nails into my arms whenever I pissed her off, as it would leave marks, but not enough to warrant any actual concern. Even now, my arms are full of claw marks from her, but she had plausible deniability, and therefore was the furthest she would go. Verbally, however, she would not hold back even a second. To highlight some of the more notable incidents, when I was 7 and the family was driving home from our grandmother's house, I guess me and my siblings were being too loud, and she unloaded on us. She called me every name under the sun, etc. Later that night was the first night I attempted to end my life, at 7 years old on Christmas. And when I told someone, because even then I knew how wrong it was for a kid to feel this way, I reached out to a family member who in hindsight was obviously going to tell her. And when my mother confronted me, she didn't say sorry. She didn't ask if I wanted to talk about it or get me therapy I clearly needed. She said, and I quote, "I don't want to hear that you're telling people things like that ever again. Again, no comfort. Just if you, a suicidal 7-year-old, want to die, keep it to yourself."
So, just keep your mouth shut.
There are a lot of other examples too. However, we're going to jump to the one time when my older sister tried to run away and ask for help from a neighbor. CPS was called once again. They interviewed me in the living room while my mother was walking in and out of the room serving everyone pizza. This one worker we're going to call Hannah genuinely should not have been in her line of work, though. She made weekly visits to my home to, quote-unquote, work with my mom and, quote-unquote, improve the family dynamic. But really, she just listened to my mom BS talk us and would back her up without listening to a word we had to say. Once I broke down crying in front of her and went on this whole rant about how these horrible things my mother taught me about myself and the world around me, and she did not acknowledge a word. Right after she was finished, my mother cut in to say, "Oh, but she said she wasn't scared of me anymore," in a facetious tone, which was out of context, by the way. I said that when she tried to threaten taking therapy away as a punishment, and I made it clear that was literally illegal, and she couldn't use that to scare me. But do you know how this woman responded to my very clear crying and begging for help? She ignored me, turned to my mother and said, "Well, she must feel safe if she's willing to say that." I get other people had it way worse. I know there are kids literally dying right now that CPS is blatantly ignoring, or worse yet, covering up. I had the privilege of having an easier situation by comparison, but just because other people have it worse does not mean that those people who cry themselves to sleep for years, every night, begging themselves not to wake up in the morning, somehow don't deserve better too.